The UCW have been using film and video for longer than most members realise. This film, Sorting It Out, starring Alfie Bass, was produced in 1948.
I had to get the day off from my appointment at the union's headquarters at Clapham Common to see the medical advisor about my chest. Kept telling myself I felt fit enough to play centre forward for the Arsenal. Up the UPW.
It marked the start of the UCW's commitment to making the union accessible to its members through video, explaining how the union works and what the member can get out of it. The UCW's current videos cover information, campaigns, education and recruitment.
Wonder how long they'll keep me.
One early programme used for information and recruitment was Who Cares?, which considered the work of the legal and medical department. Using 6 case studies, it explained how the department had won compensation for accidents and injuries for UCW members and their families. One of the UCW members featured was a postwoman from Mexborough.
Well, it was my normal round. No, I just carried on up this street, like. Well, I was coming up road, just down here, and I got some mail from Mr. Hunt's house, and I went down their path, just looking at my letters, you know, wasn't really watching where I was going. And I looked up and saw his wife with a dog on a lead, and it saw me and lunged forward. She tried to restrain it, and she couldn't hold it, and then the dog broke free, and it just attacked me. All the time, the dog was biting and doing its thing, you know. Husband, he was just sat in the house, he never came out, and eventually he did come out and took the dog off the lady, his wife, and went back in the house, and that was the last I saw of him.
After a medical report to determine the extent of her injuries, Karen received compensation. But the dog was never put down, even though the case went to the criminal court. Karen was never asked to give evidence at that hearing.
I would have liked to have gone, you know. I think if they could have seen photographs of the injuries when the dog bit me, it would have made a difference. I think if they'd have seen photographs, they would have had the dog destroyed.
So, do you find it strange that, you know, no one asked you for that?
No, not really.
Why is that?
Well, he's a policeman. No.
Was that a police dog?
No, it's a family pet.
As well as fighting for individuals, the union has fought wider campaigns, distributing its case on cassette to the public as well as its own members to rally support. Sale of the Century was the union's case in pictures against the privatisation of British Telecom.
Directress for which town, please?
Another unprofitable service on which the blind rely is directory inquiries. Whilst the government say they will provide service to rural areas and they won't scrap the 999 service, there has been no mention of directory inquiries. Several million people are dependent on the service, not just the blind, but the illiterate too. But the service is both labour-intensive and unprofitable. If it is cut back, or simply cut altogether, many jobs will be lost.
Whilst the privatisation of British Telecom did go ahead, this programme helped achieve significant safeguards in job security and services whilst the bill was in Parliament.
We're waiting on your phone. Do you want a little warning to make you get up in the morning? Is your house on fire? Do you want to set a fire? Just lift up the receiver. That's all you've got to do. And we will walk it over.
In the provisions of telephones to the disabled, the Chronic Sick and Disabled Persons Act was introduced, and it was only because we had a nationalised industry which could be supported by government that we were able to introduce such measures for the provisions of those people who are housebound and need to telephone for communications. No private industry which has to realise profits to pay its shareholders can take that into consideration. Their motive has to be profit, not the consideration of the user.
A union such as the UCW is used to fighting campaigns. but it is perhaps less easily associated with selling insurance. But in fact, the union has its own insurance society, offering cut-price deals to members. This video, Safety in Numbers, made a dull, boring subject into an interesting and amusing visual guide that helped double the society's business.
Most cars end up somewhere like this eventually, but on the way they have to be insured. And through Shiptons, the society can generally get you good terms. For example, a postman from Blackburn was paying £152 a year for comprehensive cover on a Cortina. Through the UCW Insurance Society, he gets a much lower quote, £23 a year difference. Another example, a telephonist from Preston had been paying £192 on a Renault, again for comprehensive cover. The society's quote was much less, just £134. But as well as all that, if you buy insurance from the UCW Insurance Society, you're helping to protect your colleagues while you protect yourself. And that's what being in the union is about. Safety in numbers. Bye.
Videos are also made on bread and butter issues such as pay, job security and new technology. Here, in Changing for the Future, telephonists are told how their jobs will be affected by a new agreement on which they're soon to vote.
New types of cordless switchboards made work easier. And the new ACRE system has cut down the workload as operators no longer need to write out tickets for manually connected calls. And in directory inquiries, technology has speeded up work, meaning less operators are needed. First, the microfiche system, and now this computer-based system using VDUs. The proposals were first put to the unions back in 1979, and negotiations have run for 4 years. Finally, they've come to a conclusion.
So, does this new deal represent a significant improvement in the working conditions of telephone operators, or has the UCW simply caved in under management pressure? Well, the woman who led 4 years of negotiations to conclusion is the UCW Assistant Secretary, Kim McKinley. Kim, why have these negotiations taken so long?
Well, there were two reasons mainly. Our sister trade union, the Communication Managers Association, who represent the supervisors, had difficulty in bringing themselves to the negotiating table because the proposals meant the abolition of the grades they represented.
Videos such as these are produced regularly, and every member has now seen at least one programme. They're shown at branch and district meetings and are available on mail order free of charge for members to watch at home. They're also seen at the UCW's educational schools and by new members. For the UCW, sitting down union members to watch a video has proved a far more effective form of communication than handing out piles of paper that can get ignored or thrown away.
Well, employers say that women aren't strong enough, that they don't like dirty work, that they can't work with men, they don't like swearing. Well, all those things are myths. I mean, that women have always done heavy work in factories and so on. Women working in the home do heavy work and dirty work, and I think women can either put up with swearing or ask their workmates to leave it out.
Of course, the first and most difficult hurdle that any potential employee has to cross is the recruitment process.
Oh, we use a variety of recruiting methods here. Our first priority is to try to fill the posts internally. When recruiting outside, we use specialist magazines for specialist jobs. Otherwise, we go through the local paper. Of course, much of it's done on personal recommendation. Let's face it, knowing that somebody fits in is worth 1,000 qualifications.
Certainly a company that is essentially a white company in staff and an ethos which recruits by word of mouth is bound to repeat itself. If it recruits by giving preference to the sons and daughters of those people it already employs, it's bound to repeat itself. And therefore to become very much of a closed shop and not to offer equality of opportunity.
Merle Amory is one of a team of advisors in the GLC's Contract Compliance Unit and deals directly with employers.
Most of the time the employer's argument to justify his or her advertising policy is that they can get the workforce that they need from a specific area. We have to then make the point that they have an obligation to ensure that all sections of the community are given an opportunity to see jobs that have become vacant and adverts that are placed.
We are also concerned that questions asked on an application form are specifically related to the job and not the person applying for the job.
We often have to point out to them that questions, for example, on this application form, like marital status, are potentially discriminatory. We believe that in many instances employers will use the marital status to try to determine the stability or otherwise of a potential applicant or the reliability of a potential applicant. And here we have a question about the number of children and their ages. And they will justify this by saying that often women with children are not as reliable as men because they need to take time off to look after the children. We have to point out to them that this statement itself is discriminatory, and if they were to make decisions based on this kind of information, they would be in breach of the Sex Discrimination Act.
I think the workforce here reflects the fact that there are not enough women or black people with good enough qualifications. And if there are, I'd like to know where to find them.
If a company claims that it's not able to attract ethnic minority workers, for example, we would ask them initially to make sure that there is a statement on the bottom of all adverts welcoming applications from people of ethnic minorities, from women and from people with disabilities. And we also have a number of agencies who deal with employment for ethnic minority people. Those agencies are situated throughout the country.
One of the reasons why Open Access Project was set up is the fact that black people weren't getting into professional jobs or semi-professional jobs. So it's to promote equality and opportunity. Typical example, one organisation, white organisation, in receipt of government funds, got an equal opportunities policy together, but was unsure of how to implement the policy. This meant inviting one of the project workers to come on the interview panel. They were interviewing for another worker to help them with the application, to advise them on what media to use and how to really word the application that black people will apply.
Charlton Skills Centre provides training in a range of manual trades for women, ethnic minorities and people with disabilities. Ros Howells, who's chair of the centre, knows the barriers ethnic minorities in particular face in gaining skilled work.
The sort of excuses I get are, well, we advertise externally, people come to us. If we got anyone who was black, who was suitable, we would certainly take them on. We don't have any prejudices here. The word prejudice is used as opposed to racism. And you say, well, what are you saying? No black people come to seek employment here? And they say, well, yes, they do, but you know, it's very difficult to find anybody who is trained for the sort of jobs. We do a highly skilled job, or, you know, we have to get somebody who fit in, you know. And you say, well, no black person can fit in. What do you mean fit in? What do they have to do to fit in? Have you examined that? What sorts of questions do you ask people? How do you decide? And the sort of answers you get are always, well, you know, we've had our workforce for a long time. We don't change.
As far as employing people with disabilities is concerned, nobody is more sympathetic than I am. I just don't feel that this company is geared up to cope.
Karen Newbury, a qualified community and youth worker, now working at the GLC.
But a lot of the kind of problems that employers think there are in fact don't exist. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of, if it's somebody who's in a wheelchair, cutting the legs of a desk down to make the desk at a more amenable height. It may be just putting a little wooden ramp down one step in the front door. And there are ways and means in which employers can get grant aid to increase the the employment prospects for people with disabilities.
Well, there is the Disabled Persons Employment Act, which says that companies must take a certain quota of disabled people within their workforce. That is largely not met, and there's no real teeth in that legislation. So we come along to a situation where there is lots of goodwill, but where there is an assumption that all disabled people are in wheelchairs, that therefore most jobs they cannot do. And we try and say to employers that we can provide advice from the GLC itself that has a very good policy for people with disabilities, where people with a wide range of disabilities are employed perfectly well in most jobs in the council.
But I would also say to employers, in the same way as working with women or ethnic minorities, to look at the potential of the person and to decide whether with training and with a bit of confidence and morale boosting, that person could in fact do the job, even though they may not have what one would see as paper qualifications or long-term experience.
The contract compliance policy had its origins in the United States of America. It's been working there for the past 20 years continuously. And it's become a permanent feature of the American landscape, and American companies work quite happily with the contract compliance policy.
And what we're doing in the United States.
Merrick Hussain of the New York Bureau of Labor Services recently gave a series of talks at County Hall about the American experience of contract compliance.
Many contractors, when they first had initial contact with us, were very mistrustful. It was difficult to communicate with them. They thought we were there simply to make life difficult. Over time, most of the contractors have learned that in fact we could provide them with a very good technical assistance to ensure that their employment practices are non-discriminatory and they're opening up equal opportunity. I wouldn't say this is true with all contractors, but in fact we have very good working relationships with most contractors.
The USA has shown that the long-term benefits of contract compliance repay both employer and employee. The starting point for you, the employer, is the contract compliance form, which is designed to help the GLC assess your relevant working practices so that it can decide what changes, if any, might be needed to bring your company into compliance. The form requires information on a number of things, such as your existing recruitment, promotion, and training procedures. Another key element of the form is the requirement to provide a detailed breakdown of your workforce. As we've seen with our fictional company, this, among other things, goes into the ethnic origins of your staff.
The question of ethnic monitoring is central to our unit's work, and therefore it is a requirement that companies monitor both the existing workforce and also applicants to the company for employment.
Now, I know that there are people who say they have worries about this. My answer is generally twofold. If I'm talking to people from the black community, what I say to them is this: that a person must be mad if he needs a computer printout to tell that you are black. People who are black are color-coded before computers came along. If you're going to do effective planning, you have to have an effective database. And the only way you can have an effective database is if you're keeping the statistics.
So I think that's...
Once a company has returned the completed form to the contract compliance unit, then the review process begins.
We have to satisfy ourselves as a council that they are complying with the Sex Discrimination and Race Relations Act and will continue to comply with it. A company that we saw last week, a large paper company, well-known company in the country, provided us with an example of a wide range of advertisements that they placed in the press for vacancies in their company, and nearly all of them had age limits, 18 to 23, mystifying age limits really for particular jobs. These age limits can operate against women because women who have left work to have children to come back into the workforce will certainly be older than 23 in most instances. We asked the company why they were setting such age limits on their jobs, and faced with the question, they actually didn't know and immediately said, "You're quite right, I don't know why, we always have done, but we don't really know why. We'll look at that. Yes, you're right." So these are the times when, in a sense, we're a catalyst for companies reviewing practices that there's no real need for and they haven't got any great attachment to.
I can see only benefit coming from a dialogue, and it's an informal dialogue, between a personnel department and the members of the unit. Because the unit is also trying to understand the problems that management face in their employment situation. It's very much a two-way discussion. And certainly in my experience, it's been very creative because they've given us some very good ideas.
An integral part of the success of contract compliance will come from the active participation of your unions in evolving the right policy. Traditionally, the unions have seen their principal role as one of protecting jobs and wages and ensuring health and safety at work. Mel Reid of ASTMS recognises that equal opportunities must play a more important role within the unions in the future.
I think in terms of the union's policy, clearly there is a gap between our policies on equal opportunities for black members, for women members, and what actually happens in practice. That applies to all unions. But I wouldn't want to make too much of that gap. I think there's an increasing awareness among women members with whom I'm chiefly involved that they need to make equal opportunities policies work in practice.
If they are really talking about committing themselves seriously to equal opportunities, they will find contracts compliance arrangements very helpful indeed. It would add strength to what they're already trying to do in terms of ensuring that black workers and women workers are treated equally at the place of work.
Contract compliance is with us to stay because it makes sense morally, legally and economically.
We do not accept, we do not believe that the ratepayers' money, taxpayers' money, should go to subsidise racial or sexual discrimination. Ethnic minorities, women, disabled people, they contribute through their taxes, through their rates, to the purchasing power of public bodies, and they have a right to expect that the monies that they're contributing to public bodies are not then used to worsen or even maintain discrimination against them.
I'm a little surprised sometimes to hear of companies who are objecting to complying with the compliance unit's request for information, because all that they're asking is information about what companies should be doing anyway. And when I say should be doing anyway, I'm not meaning specifically to comply with the law, but to make themselves more effective.
Discrimination persists at all levels of our society, and it may be happening in your own company. It's in all our interest to do something about it. The end product of contract compliance may not be immediately tangible in terms of profit or loss, but its effects will be far-reaching, and as the American experience has shown, it does make good business sense.
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I'm giving an interview about it right now. Be with you in a moment. It's Anne Collins, my opposite number. Remember I told you about her earlier. Sorry, Anne. Yes, I'm telling them exactly what I think about it. No, I certainly haven't filled the forms in. Really? You've actually filled yours in? Well, yes, I know it's a valuable contract, but... Industrial relations. Yes, I suppose it could be beneficial, but... What? The American subsidiary? No, I had no idea. Well, of course, I wouldn't want anyone to think we weren't progressive. Yes, I see your point. Well, leave it with me, and I'll think it over. See you soon. Oh, Pat, would you ask George from personnel to come in? Well, I'd like to take a closer look at that contract compliance form. Huh? Well, yes, I've been thinking it over, and I think I might have been a bit hasty.